All right, folks, I've been gone a couple days, had Halloween, had a bunch going on, but I have not stopped following the insanity in the news, in real life, and most importantly on Twitter.com. I have to say, I've been pretty bummed out lately, not only because thousands of people are dying, in a war in the Middle East, but heck, there are thousands of people dying in other wars too. But I think I was really getting depressed over the fact that people were still just eating up the slop put out by the media, and I was also disappointed that, at per usual, I guess you would call them the pro-Palestinian crowd was pretty stupid in their own right. And I'm referring, of course, to like college kids in the U.S., not to people who just want the Palestinians to stop being killed. But the whole discourse was pretty stupid. It was just a rehash of what we get every few years. It was no different than 2014 or 2009 or any of the other spats in history that I'm too young to remember personally. However, in the last couple of days, I'm actually changing my perspective's been changed a little bit. I think that people are starting to wake up a bit. The fact that that the Israel lobby is the alphabet lobby for the right. Republicans and so-called conservatives have their own political correctness that they must enforce. It just happens to be regarding Israel and not 47 genders. And when people at first, it seemed, did not realize that, it was pretty black-pilling, because I thought that the right had grown a lot. I thought that people were smarter than they used to be, that they were more awake to the realities of the world, the fact that nothing is black and white. But yet, 90% of your right-wing influencers and commentators, that's being generous, 98%, they all went along with if you question a single thing that Israel does, you are a racist. But I saw someone push back. He pushed back ever so slightly, not even against Israel itself, but against more money to Israel, and that was Congressman Thomas Massie, the lone Republican to vote against sending $14 billion to Israel, and I believe the bill was a $200 billion bill total, included $14 billion for Israel and then like $100 and something billion for Ukraine. But nevertheless, since it had something to do with Israel and benefited Israel in some way, AIPAC, per usual, went scorched earth against anyone who would dare oppose this bill, who wouldn't vote in favor of it, even though it passed overwhelmingly. There's no reason to try and burn bridges with these people if over a minor disagreement, but that's just how AIPAC is. They demand total conformity and absolute, not even loyalty. Loyalty is not strong enough of a term. Devotion, fealty is probably the correct term, fealty to Israel's interests. And so they excoriated Thomas Massie for voting against this bill. They labeled him an anti-Semite and said that he is no different, than AOC and all of the other squad gals who voted against this bill. Even though Massie's critique of the bill was very mild, it was the most mild one you could have. He simply said it was too expensive and that the United States is broke and we have no business sending $200 billion to fund wars around the world. This is something that a diplomat, this is a minor difference that a diplomat would try and look past, would try and resolve, but a Stalinist who demands not only that you conform, but that you like it. This, to them, is an excuse, is a justification for a digital lynching. And so that's what they attempted. The Israel lobby attempted to cancel Thomas Massie, who survived being canceled by Donald Trump of all people. So this guy, I think if he was able to stick to his guns against Trump over the budget and come out on top, I don't think that AIPAC is going to be able to take him down. And what do you know? AIPAC actually got ratioed on Twitter. And so I know we're grasping at straws when I'm looking for a good news story in the world, and I say, well, the Israel lobby got ratioed on Twitter.com, guys. Maybe it's not all so bad. Yeah, I understand. That's grasping at straws. That doesn't actually help anyone. That doesn't make our world any less shitty of a place. But it's little changes like this that can spark shifts in public thinking. Or not spark it. These are indicators of where public opinion is moving. The fact that there were people willing to defend Thomas Massie when he was labeled an anti-Semite by the Israel lobby. And if you defend an anti-Semite, of course, you're an anti-Semite yourself. You're a vile racist, a neo-Nazi, a white supremacist. All of those things will be chucked at you. And not by the left, but by your so-called fellow right-wingers. And yet, he was willing to take the heat, and people stood by him. And so perhaps with the general public, the Israel lobby has burned up some of its credibility. Not too long ago, there was no such thing as criticism of Israel. It was only recently that even I, as fringe of a thinker as I am, encountered such a thing. The concept of criticizing Israel was it was something that never even came into my mind for most of my life. And yes, I did first discover it while I was a college student, but not through college activities. The crazy half-shaved head lesbians at my college would not have spurred me to question the narrative of the Israeli government. It was actually through listening to just random interviews and podcasts, namely the Scott Horton Show, that kind of led me down that path of thinking, hey, what actually is all that stuff in Israel about? What do they fight about exactly? What's the history of all these wars they've been fighting with each other? And it really was that simple. You just sort of scratch the surface, and it's like, oh, they were lying. The news didn't tell us the truth. They fed us phony narratives. I'm shocked. The media lies, who would have guessed? But, I learned that by listening to fringe podcasts. The only other way you could learn that, either than by listening to some fringe people who point out to you, totally public record historical facts, would be to actually do the research yourself. And nobody's going to do that. They're going to turn on Fox and CNN, and they're going to hear the exact same message from both of them about how how Israel has a right to defend itself, and self-defense is important, and that's a fundamental bedrock American principle, and so we need to let the Israelis defend themselves. And everyone will say, yeah, self-defense, I'm all for that. And nothing says self-defense like the extermination of 7,000 people, most of which women and children. And even in this current war, even if history started on October the 7th, we don't need any of the context. Let's say history starts on October the 7th. And there's this terrible, let's say totally unprovoked attack by Hamas. And let's just say outright, for the sake of argument, Hamas 100% evil. There is nothing, there's nothing positive or worth supporting within that organization. You have an organization of pure evil that attacks 100% innocent people, kills 1,400 of them in a couple of days. Okay, that's very bad. And then the response by that innocent group of people is to kill many more thousands innocent people who happen to be neighbors with the bad guys who killed some of their people. Even without the past context of the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's pretty easy for someone to come to the conclusion that, you know what, in this case, I think Israel might be the bad guy. Even if we all agree, yes, it was very bad for 1,400 Israelis to be killed, that is done, that is finished. The killing has stopped. But what goes on now is the killing of the other side, the killing of the people on the other side of the fence. And so the intuitive thing for an ordinary person who is not biased, who just cares about human life, is to say, okay, well, why don't we stop the killing that's going on right now? And they say, well, what about the killing on October the 7th? It's like, okay, well, that was then. This is now. That killing is already done. We can't stop killing that's already ended. What we can stop is killing that is currently ongoing. And so even in the month of October, less than a month into this war, the Israeli narrative about this particular war has grown tired. And people aren't buying it. They certainly aren't buying it in the Arab world. At first, I thought that Hamas was miscalculating when they went and killed all these people, because I thought, well, gee, isn't this going to make the Israelis sympathetic in the eyes of the Sunni monarchies who are already moving closer to Israel and have signed all these agreements with Israel? But I spoke too soon, because I guess what Hamas was going for is they were trying to provoke this slaughter and massacre of their neighbors, because they knew that Israel would so overplay their hand that they would completely, whatever goodwill Israel had because of October the 7th, they were going to squander it very quickly and soon build up a tremendous amount of ill will. And so, even though obviously it's a very evil tactic, I will give Hamas some credit, just from an intellectual standpoint, for playing the long game. And again, it's not okay to sacrifice your fellow countrymen or foreigners. But at least now I finally see the logic of what they did. People usually don't engage in terrorism because it's ineffective. They do it because it works, and I think this is an example of that. As Israel increases the body count in this war, as they kill more and more women and children on the Palestinian side, many multiples of what Hamas killed on the Israeli side, they are making the chance that the other Arab states might reconcile with Israel and really, become close allies with Israel. They're making that less and less possible. At this point, I don't see how any of the surrounding Arab populations would ever tolerate their government making nice with Israel. And Yemen, of course, has declared war on Israel. And this is the same government in Yemen that was under assault by the United States and Saudi Arabia. So it makes sense that they would express their distaste towards Israel. A formal declaration of war probably doesn't cost them much, because they know Israel is, pretty far away, and hopefully, I guess in their eyes, Israel can't hurt them. I would think Israel's probably got some missiles they could lob at Yemen if they wanted to, but perhaps they're so preoccupied that they wouldn't get around to it, is the calculation in Sana'a. Nevertheless, I think that they are doing irreparable harm to Israel's image. And so if I were at Gaza, I still would not think that this is worth it. And frankly, if I were in Hamas's shoes and I were having to live through this, even if I survived, I don't know if I would think, no matter how radicalized I was, that it is worth sacrificing thousands and thousands of my own people just to degrade the reputation of Israel. Because as I've said, it's impossible for them to beat Israel militarily. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow. I promise. I know I said that and then I skipped 2 days. You know what? That phrase of mine, let's just say it's non-canon. It just sort of is what it is. You know, maybe instead of me missing days after I said I'd be there tomorrow, perhaps I just get sucked through a time warp and I end up a day or two in the future sometimes. And so for me, it really is the tomorrow, but for you, it seems like I missed a couple days.